Aikwi, Neknamalita. Aikwi, Neknamalita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian. Today I will be talking about books that I've read that I've enjoyed with mothers in them. So happy Mother's Day. I thought this would be a fun video to do of just talking about books with mothers as a character in books, really, in books that I've enjoyed. I am not a mother. I have a mother. I love her very much. Mother's Day, Mom, if you're watching this, I don't think she is. But my mom's not the biggest reader right now. I've actually been recommending her more books than anything. So I think right now she's going through the Shadow and Bone series. So, which I have not read. She did that on her own because she enjoyed the adaptation of it so much. So these are just several books that I've picked out that have had mothers in them in some capacity that I have ultimately enjoyed. The first, I feel like, I don't know if it's the best representation of mothers. I mean, some mothers, I'm sure. But that is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. This other mother is very iconic to me. So I particularly love the adaptation for this. The adaptation, this is like one that I've been meaning to talk about in like a review of the book and the adaptation. Sorry, there's like cat hair. So Coraline is following Coraline, whose family's new flat has 21 windows and 14 doors. 13 of the doors open and close, and the 14th is locked, and on the other side is only a brick wall. Until the day Coraline unlocks the door and finds a passage to another flat in another house just like her own, only it's different. At first things seem marvelous in the other flat. The food is better, the toy box is filled with wind-up angels that flutter around the bedroom. Books whose pictures writhe and crawl and shimmer, little dinosaur skulls that chatter their teeth, but there's another mother and another father, and they want Coraline to stay with them and be their little girl. They want to change her and never let her go. Other children are trapped there as well, lost souls behind mirrors. Coraline is their only hope of rescue. She will have to fight with all her wits and all the tools she can find if she is to save the lost children, her ordinary life, and herself. So yeah, I've been meaning to actually do a review of both this book and its adaptation. I personally enjoy the movie a bit better than I do the book. I swear I've reread this one so far I've reread it like 3 times, and every time it gets a little more and it gets lower and lower on my rating, because I tend to find it a bit boring. Coraline is a bit flat. This is a horror children's book, which I thought was interesting. There are elements in here that I was actually surprised about because it pushed it further than the movie did in terms of the horror aspect. This one, ultimately, the other mother is a bit frightening in here, right? So she's trying to manipulate Coraline into staying in their world, whether it is giving her everything that she wants or threatening. So I think this has a very interesting other mother dynamic. In the movie, I know it's a bit more prevalent of what her relationship is with her real mother versus the other mother. So yeah, I thought that just to get it out of the way, because I think when I think of mother, this is the first one that I think of. So yeah. Next I have With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This one is following a teen mom. Ever since she got pregnant freshman year, Imani Santiago's life has been about making the tough decisions, doing what has to be done for her daughter and her abuela. The one place she can let all that go is in the kitchen. There she lets her hands tell her what to cook, listening to her intuition and adding a little something magical every time, turning her food into straight up goodness. Even though she's always dreamed of working in the kitchen, after she graduates, Imani knows that it's not worth her time to pursue the impossible. Yet despite the rules she's made for her life and everyone else's rules she refuses to play by, once Imani starts cooking, her only choice is to let her talent break free. So this one I thought was really interesting, the fact that we have a mother as a protagonist, particularly a young protagonist still in high school, making those tough choices for her daughter, and for herself to try to figure out how to best go about life, not only what's best for her daughter, but what's best for the both of them. So I particularly really enjoyed this book. I know that I was hesitant when I've read, it's been a year since I've read this, but I remember when it first came out being a little hesitant to pick it up just because I was nervous that she was going to get into trouble or there was going to be some cringy elements, and really it really wasn't. It was Imani being comfortable with herself and growing into herself to be confident in making decisions for her daughter and for herself. So I thought it was really fun and one that I would have to mention here. Next we have This Poison Heart by Kaylin Barron. This one we are following Breezy's, who has a gift. With a single touch she can grow plants from tiny seeds to rich blooms. When Breezy's aunt dies and wills her dilapidated estate in rural New York, Bree and her parents hope that, surrounded by plants and flowers, she will finally learn to control her gift. But their new home is sinister in ways they never expected. It comes with a mysterious set of instructions, a walled garden filled with the deadliest botanicals in the world, and generations of secrets. There is more to Bree's sudden inheritance than she could have imagined, and she is determined to uncover it. So Breezy's is adopted. Her parents are sapphic, so she has two moms, and they're more side characters, but we get what I like about it is that we get their personalities, and I feel like a lot of YA doesn't allow that it's kind of like they're there but they might as well not be, because for whatever reason, like, the protagonist doesn't need to check in with them at all. And this one was just really nice because the mothers, Breezy's moms, were confident in Bree's ability to be able to decide for herself what she needed to do and to offer their help when she needed it. Again, we get both of their personalities coming through and what their concerns are for their daughter. I ultimately really enjoyed this. I would say to look up content warnings, particularly for the end of this book. I have yet to read, so far I think it's a duology. I think it's only going to be a duology. I have the second book, I just haven't read it yet. So, but ultimately, I mean, this is botanical, magical fun. A similar respect, we have A Lot's Away by Darcy Littlebadger. This one, we imagine an America in very similar to our own. Imagine an America very similar to our own. It's got homework, best friends, and pistachio ice cream. There are some differences. This America been shaped dramatically by magic, monsters, knowledge, legends, and of its peoples, those indigenous and those not. Some of these forces are charmingly everyday, like the ability to make an orb of light appear or travel across the world through rings of fungi. But other forces are less charming and should never see the light of day. Alatsoi lives in the slightly stranger America. She can raise the ghosts of dead animals, a skill passed down through generations of her life and Apache family. Her beloved cousin has been murdered in a town that wants no prying eyes, but she is going to do more than pry. The picture perfect facade of Willoughby masks gruesome secrets, and she will rely on her wits, skills, and friends to tear off the mask and protect her family. So once again, we are following a YA protagonist. I will admit that this one feels a little more middle grade than it does YA. But what I particularly loved about this book was that the parents were still here. Alatsue checks in with her mother and father, and ultimately her mom's pretty much a badass, because at one point she ends up dispelling a vampire, and I loved how she dispelled it. Like, I particularly remember just going, heck yes, when that moment happened. And of course, like, Elatsue's mother and father are very protective of her, and so she checks in with them. They are supportive of her, but they're also trying to protect her, so they are involved with this, and I very much appreciate it. Also, in the same respect, we have Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. This is a recent read of mine that I feel like I've talked about a lot, so I apologize. But we are following Mackenzie, who moves from the High Plains to Vancouver after her kokum dies, and to get away from the sorrow, the unspoken about sorrow that fills the house. Once in Vancouver, after a little bit, her sister ends up dying, and she doesn't go back for the funeral. But shortly after, I think a year after her sister dies, Mackenzie ends up having dreams, particularly of one night in particular at a lake with her sisters and her cousin. But she doesn't remember all that happened that night. But this dream keeps coming back, and it becomes more and more vivid and more real, to the point where she ends up having a dream that she tears a head off a crow, and the next morning she wakes up with the crow head in her bed and can still feel the beak digging into her palm. She also wakes up from having a nightmare about drowning, only to be vomiting up water. So she, fearing for herself, she ends up going back to visit her family, thinking that that would help, only for the dreams to get more intense and more dangerous. So what is it about this night at the lake that she needs to remember? She ends up getting her family to help. I've said this before. The first half of this book was very much like very meandering to me and very slow going, but the later half I like flew through in a night. We do get Mackenzie's mom in here as she tries to protect Mackenzie and doesn't know how, as well as the loss of her daughter, Mackenzie's sister, and trying to protect her that way as well. So we kind of get Mackenzie's mom in here, but ultimately what we also get is aunties, which can very much act as mother figures in our lives. Like, whether you're auntie by blood or not, it takes a village, right? So I particularly really like that aspect of it, of bringing aunties in, as well as kokum. I mean, grandma is very much a mother figure in our lives as well. And I thought it was just so heartwarming. So I particularly really like this, and I think that there's that complication of like not wanting to upset mom, right? Particularly after she's already lost something that she felt like she couldn't help. And so it's this interesting dynamic. And then of course she doesn't want to lose any more of her children, right? But she has to trust in her daughters to know what to do. So I love that relationship between them. I love that that feeling of having to let go. It's very much very relatable. So yeah. Next, I also have A House with Good Bones. This one we are following Sam, who is an archaeological entomologist. She is on her way to an archaeological dig site, only to be told that the dig site has to be halted because they found human remains. So instead she goes to visit her mom in South Carolina. She was told by her brother that he was worried about her, about their mom, but Sam kind of blew it off, thinking he was kind of over-exaggerating, or it wasn't anything to worry about, only to get to their mom's house and she's starting to realize what he meant. There are vultures watching her house, her mom's house. Her mom has lost a lot of weight. Her mom is acting real weird and saying that Sam is misremembering some things that happened in her past, that Sam's pretty sure she didn't misremember. She very much remembers these things. So we slowly try to figure out, like, we're slowly figuring out Sam's mom. Sorry, I can't remember her name. And like what the deal is, like trying to figure out the difference between how Sam sees her and has seen her throughout her life versus what's happening to her now. And that is a fun, like, trying to figure out that relationship and trying to figure out like their connection. I very much enjoyed it, as well as like that generative cyclical trauma, right? So her mom, Sam's grandmother, wasn't necessarily the best person. So we see some of that in Sam's mom, and how Sam's mom tried to protect Sam from that. So it's really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought it was really fun. And then once we figured out actually what Sam and her mom's relationship is, I really appreciated. And then this one's a little different. It's not so much let me just show you what it is. So this is When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. This was one of my favorite books of 2022. I would say that it's not as highly rated as I had originally rated it. I originally rated it as a 5.5. I would say it was a 4.5 at this point, but it is one that I constantly think about. And the reason for the lowering is mostly just because it is a very white feminist centric viewpoint. There are mentions of diversity in here, but not to the point where it's very impactful. It's more of a side thing, and it's just blips. But ultimately we are following Alex Green, who is a young girl in a world much like ours, except for its most seminal event, the mass dragoning of 1955, when hundreds of thousands of ordinary wives and mothers sprouted wings, scales, and talons, left a trail of fiery destruction in their paths and took to the skies. Was it their choice? What will become of those left behind? Why did Alex's beloved Aunt Marla transform, but Alex's mother did not? No one knows. It's taboo to speak of it. Forced into silence, Alex nevertheless must face the consequences of this astonishing event. A mother more protective than ever, an absentee father, their upsetting instance when her aunt never existed, and watching her beloved cousin Beatrice become dangerously obsessed with the forbidden. So this is kind of unconventional mothers in terms of Alex. I guess this is kind of a spoiler, so I'll put the spoilery thing down here, and when it's gone, I'm done talking about spoilers. But ultimately, Alex's mother ends up dying, and there's not a lot of questions that Alex didn't have a chance to ask, as well as, or did ask but never got real answers to. And so she ends up having to raise Beatrice herself, like being a child. And she's put into this really just unfortunate position because of her father, who is a piece of work. But we see Alex raising Beatrice and doing the best she can, being a child herself. And I know that this can happen a lot, and it does happen a lot within our own society, as we kind of look at older siblings being the parent of their younger siblings, and kind of just being that help that the help that parents want, as well as sometimes the older child just kind of is like placed into that unfortunate circumstance. So in this one in particular, Alex ends up having to do that, and I think it's a really interesting take, and I really like the dragoning aspect of this book. But like I said, it's a very white feminist centric viewpoint. But yeah, it's a very thought provoking book, and I really did enjoy it. I just would have to take away a point or half a point or half a star. And I want more growth and more diversity and more world building within this book. Like, if there was like more elements of this and it came from different perspectives throughout the dragoning, it would be really interesting. But yeah, I thought this was an interesting one for mothers. But in particular, when it comes to this book, it's very much what, like, time of 1955 and what women had to deal with. In terms of the misogyny, the stereotyping, the everything, and like just getting tired of it. So, and then finally, I know this seems a little odd, but hear me out. I'm also going to suggest Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer because I can't stop talking about this book. So it's an Indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and teaching of plants by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Robin Wall Kimmerer is Potawatomi. She's also a botanist. And how to look at the world in a certain lens. But being Potawatomi, she learned how to view the world in another lens. And so she's kind of combining both in order to be able to teach and to learn to teach, but as well as to learn from. So here, let me just read you the synopsis. As a botanist, Robin Wall Kimmerer has been trained to ask questions of nature with the tools of science. As a member of the citizen Potawatomi Nation, She embraces the notion that plants and animals are our oldest teachers, and braiding sweetgrass humor brings these lenses of knowledge together to show that the awakening of a wider ecological consciousness requires the acknowledgement and celebration of our reciprocal relationship with the rest of the living world, for only when we can hear the languages of other beings are we capable of understanding the generosity of the earth and learning to give our own gifts in return. And so, you could look at this as more of like this is another Earth Day. Let's read this. And yeah, I'm mostly thinking about it in terms of Mother Earth, in terms of not only let's celebrate mothers, but let's also continue to think about the earth and our impacts upon it, as it still generously gives us gifts and keeps us surviving. So yeah. So yeah, those are the books that I suggest for Mother's Day that feature mothers in some capacity. If you've read any of these, please let me know your thoughts down in the comments down below. I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, since I'm all about strawberries today, is there a strawberry emoji? Can we do that? Let's do that. Otherwise, I hope to all the mothers out there, I hope you have a lovely Mother's Day, whatever that means to you. Otherwise, be sure to give this video a like if you have yet to do so. Subscribe if you want to see more of me, and I hope that you are in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading. I will see you in another video very soon. Chew.